For those visiting any large port around the Caribbean, whether it be Miami, Cozumel, Nassau, or even St. Martin, there are plenty of opportunities to get a good look at a number of cruise ships, ranging widely in size, configuration, and even color scheme. It is always a good time trying to figure out whether or not you'd like to sail on any one of them down the road. For many, appearances are all they need to, if you will, judge a vessel. It's certainly not a bad thing, but there is always another side to that coin. There are many icons of another era in the cruise industry that no longer shine as a consequence of how much innovation has occurred since they were launched, and as a result, many are unaware of what they contributed and simply see them as non-desirables. This is the case with many of Carnival Cruise Line's older vessels, which are often seen as out-of-date cookie-cutter party ships. While there may be some elements to support those claims, many are unaware of the other side of the coin, which is why they exist in the first place and what they inevitably contributed to the cruise industry. Some elements that they may now enjoy on modern ships may not have even existed without some of these early pioneers. One that stands out in my mind is one that was launched all the way back in early 1990. Today there is a divide as to what people think of her. Some, who are often those who did not get to experience her, especially in the early years, think of her as a ship that should have been kicked to the curb a long time ago, pointing to her external and internal appearance. But a surprising number of others look at her with fond memories, as she was the first cruise ship that many hundreds of thousands of people ever got to go on. Upon her debut, she was not only one of the largest passenger ships ever built, but she was also the first new-build cruise ship to be operated on short itineraries. Combined with her very unique interior design and affordability, she ended up becoming so successful that she became the lead ship in a class of a record-breaking 8 ships that created a magic formula which would guide their owners for the next 2 decades. This ship was Carnival Fantasy. Carnival Fantasy is, arguably, the first true incarnation of Carnival's ever-growing domination in that part of the cruise industry timeline. It is true, she had many revolutionary elements for the company and for the industry, but she was equally a very evolutionary vessel for Carnival, especially when compared to their previous lineup of vessels, which in some cases weren't all that different. So what exactly made her, and her eventual 7 sisters, so wildly successful for their owners? For that, we need to examine both the vessels and external factors that eventually culminated into the conception of Carnival Fantasy. Carnival Cruise Line was founded by businessman Ted Arison, who had previously helped found Norwegian Cruise Line with clone Colossus in 1966. The early cruise industry, though small, was filled with many startups that all sought to be the eventual dominator once the industry got onto its feet. Both Colossus and Arison were visionary men. They knew long-term planning and risk-taking were essential to win. However, both men had different visions. Due to this, along with several other factors, they eventually split, and Arison decided to invest in his own cruise company, Carnival Cruise Line. His goal was simple: to create a cruise company that would help bring cruising to the masses. At the time, cruising was seen as a privilege of the wealthy and elderly. It was something that wasn't thought to be accessible to everyday middle or lower class Americans. Ted wanted to change this issue. In March 1972, they started their venture with Mardi Gras. She was originally built as the RMS Empress of Canada of the Canadian Pacific Company, but with the jet airliner now dominating the transatlantic trade, she had been laid up for several months. With the payment and a modest renovation, she departed Miami in the hopes of being the first venture in the Carnival saga. Upon exiting the harbor, she ran aground. After over 24 hours and having disembarked all of the passengers, she finally broke free. Definitely not the best start for any shipping company, let alone a new cruise line. For the first several years, they struggled financially. Mardi Gras was a good ship, but she was not an overly alluring ship. But by 1975, they were making a slim profit. Like a true gambler, Harrison decided to purchase a second ship with the savings, which ended up being the former RMS Empress of Britain, also of the Canadian Pacific Line. When she was inspected, it was found that she was in a very poor state. A simple refit would not be enough. Harrison decided to bring along architect Joe Farkas to help construction manage the conversion process. Farkas, at the time, was working for an architectural firm that happened to have Harrison as a client. He had a special love of ships and their technology, making him the perfect man to head this process that needed to be done in just 6 weeks. Following the conversion, the newly named Carnival entered service in early 1976. She was one of the first ships to feature professional venues that helped make the ship more of a destination, rather than simply being a vessel that carried people to a destination. This concept was not really heard of at the time. It allowed for profits to grow more. Not long afterward, Harrison was ready to buy a third ship. For this ship, which ended up being the former RMS Transvaal Castle of the Union Castle Line, Harrison agreed to let Farkas to oversee the design of the refit. Following a $30 million refurbishment in Japan, she entered the Carnival fleet as Festival in 1977. Thanks to Farkas's hard work and vision, Festival became a turning point for Carnival. He took what had separated Carnival from typical cruise ships, with the ship being the destination, and dialed it up further. He, in a similar manner to the designers of the ocean liners of the past, felt that most passengers did not want to think they were on a ship that would take them into heavy seas and bad weather, which would inevitably lead to seasickness. To help alleviate this, their interiors were designed to replicate classic or modern hotels and mansions on land. Now in the cruise industry, Farkas became an early pioneer in reintroducing this concept. The ship would be the destination. Every public space would replicate designs on land, be utilized to the maximum, and the destinations would simply be the icing on the cake. Festival's conversion was designed with all of this in mind. Harrison knew he had something special with Farkas as a designer. When the time came to risk it all and order their first new-built cruise ship, it wasn't a question who would help design her interiors. When Tropical entered service in early 1982, she cemented the company's external image with the signature winged funnel. The evolution of these first 4 ships helped grow the company from essentially a bottom feeder to a true competitor within the industry. With the possibility of taking the top slot, they now needed to find their clientele and branding. Who exactly are we going to cater to? How would their needs and wants be incorporated into new ships? How can we separate ourselves from the competition? All very valid questions at this time, as it was becoming clear what other companies had survived their initial foundings and would be around in coming years to challenge for the top spot. These included Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, Norwegian Cruise Line, Holland America Line, and Princess. Now was the time to kick themselves into high gear and begin to massively expand the fleet. The initial objective for the new class was as follows: to be bigger than Tropical and feature or improve things found on both that vessel and Festival. One of the first things Farkas looked at was circulation, or in other words, the flow and distribution of passengers throughout the ship, which was an issue found on Tropical with the uneven upper deck arrangement. One of the solutions implemented was an asymmetric interior promenade that would both function as a corridor and entertainment space that would connect to other restaurants, entertainment venues, and so on. Entertainment areas, such as the theater, were expanded to be multiple stories tall, and the non-accommodation public decks would all connect, without barriers, in the upper part of the hull. The exterior promenade would also now completely wrap around on just one level without barriers. The first vessel in this new class, Holiday, would implement these new features as well as the next evolution in Farkas's signature interior design, which by now was called Entertainment Architecture. He called the finishings on Holiday high concept and contemporary. However, due to stability issues found during the sea trials, some of this had to be cut back, and what remained was what he called poor outcomes in terms of quality. Despite this cutback in the interior finishings, Holiday instantly became a hit. For the next two ships, Arison asked Farkas to design one contemporary and the other traditional in order to see what their passengers preferred from a design standpoint. This fell exactly into line with what Farkas thought of designing interiors. While the exterior would be virtually the same, each vessel should have its own design and theme on the inside. Jubilee, which entered service in 1986, would be the traditional ship design, featuring a more subdued finish with rich woods. In 1987, the more contemporary design entered service, and she was named Celebration. The three members of the Holiday class, along with a newly created TV marketing campaign, launched Carnival into the households of everyday middle-class Americans. By the end of 1987, Carnival earned the title of most popular cruise line in the world. They were the leaders in passenger numbers, receiving roughly 15% of the market. But not far behind was Norwegian, which had 14%, and Royal Caribbean with 11%. Carnival was beginning to find their chemistry and what they were looking for. They were now at the top, but everyone knew it would not take long for the competition to come up with something to rival them. They needed to create a ship that not only demonstrated their new position as the cruise industry leader, but would be a further evolution in what could be their magic formula and would bring so many new cruisers into the mix. In early 1986, just as Celebration was wrapping up construction, Arison, filled with more confidence than ever before, issued a proclamation to his top people to begin creating ideas for the ideal cruise ship. From Farkas's standpoint, he saw this as the opportunity to further improve the Holiday design and to bring entertainment architecture into a new realm. At the same time this was going on, one of the company's main rivals brought forth something that threatened Carnival's position. Royal Caribbean Cruise Line was in the process of designing and creating what would eventually be Sovereign of the Seas. At nearly 74,000 gross tons, she would bring forth all sorts of furs for both Royal Caribbean and the industry, including the first true vertical atrium called the Centrum. This not only brought forth natural light that opened up the interior of the ship, but it acted as a connector to all sorts of different important venues, such as the main dining rooms, theater, and pool deck. This ship alone was definitely going to be a tough competitor. Even though the Holiday class were by far Carnival's best ships to date, they were nearly 40% smaller than this new vessel, which would surely have both a better general arrangement and bring in numerous new passengers. The first thing that Farkas began to design was the atrium for the new ship. It certainly would not be a copy of Sovereign's. He wanted it to be taller, wider, and adorned with the biggest glass dome possible. This would inevitably give any passenger a sense of wonder and amazement about the sheer size of the ship. It would also give them a sense of place and relief, especially since no one wants to go through the troubles of traveling just to walk through a tiny gangway door into a small one-story lobby. That would inevitably give the passenger no sense of location and maybe even some claustrophobic feelings. This 7-story atrium would be just the beginning of an exciting ship, one that would invigorate the same excitement they had when they first booked their cruise. The ports of call, more than ever, would almost be irrelevant. There was just one hurdle to cross with this plan, however, and that was Ted Arison. He, after all, was a businessman. When Farkas presented the original drawings to him, the argument in his mind was that this extensive space would get rid of so many possible cabins, which obviously translated into lost revenue and waste of space. However, as always, he listened to differing opinions, and he eventually became convinced of the importance of having the atrium. The exterior wouldn't be anything radically different from before, being a longer and taller version of the holiday class. The general arrangement plan would also not be too dissimilar either. The asymmetrical promenade, with the adjacent public rooms, proved to be a very well used and efficient concept, so it would be simply expanded on this ship. What would set this ship apart, along with the new atrium, would be the interior decor, along with a noticeable jump in size, around 30,000 gross tons bigger than Holiday. By the end of 1986, Farkas presented the concept drawings to both Carnival and architectural firms in Miami for final approval. They were all quickly given the okay. The endeavor by this time was known as Project 600. It was now time to look for a builder to bring this ship to life. In 1987, a formal contract was signed between Carnival Cruise Line and the Wärtsilä Marine Shipyard based in Helsinki, Finland, to build Project 600. She would now be known as Yard Number 479 and had a projection to be completed by early winter 1989. With all the concept drawings finalized and approved, they were sent over to the shipyard in order for mock-ups to be created that would need to be approved before the fitting out process. Everything, right away, seemed to run pretty smoothly. After all, this shipyard and the company were one of the most premier in the entire world. However, behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. In 1987, being well into 479's initial construction, the shipyard had a net loss of $99 million, and it was forecasted to be even worse the following year. And it was. In 1988, they got a further $148 million into debt. When it came time for 479's interior mock-ups to be approved, Farkas flew out to Finland to give his approval. The first area inspected was a 2-story section of a staircase. To Farkas' shock, it wasn't his design in any way. He tried in every way to figure out what to say, and eventually he blurted out that this was not their design. It got even worse later on when the cabins were inspected. None of the intended materials or finishings matched. It was a major blow for Farkas. Following the inspections, Ericsson was notified of the issue. He instructed Farkas to handle the situation with the CEO of the shipyard. In the following meeting, he made it very clear that the contract was not being fulfilled as signed and that the delivery date was very much at risk. Progress in his mind was virtually zero. This would inevitably lead to delays or even worse, cancellation. The CEO listened, and that was it. Thankfully, he indeed listened, and a huge turnaround in the fitting out department was quickly done. When the time came for the next round of inspections, everything was as designed. 479 was now no longer at risk of being delayed or cancelled. From then on, everything was indeed running smoothly. Communication improved, and all the lost time was made up quickly. This restoration and reputation gave Ericsson the go-ahead to order 2 sister ships of 479 in 1989 to be built by the yard. The hull of 479 was floated out from under the covered dry dock at the Wärtsilä Marine Yard. She was then towed to a nearby pier to be fitted out internally and be completed as a passenger ship. By July 1989, the signature Carnival funnel had been installed, the majority of the exterior painted, and the first lifeboats put into place. In early fall, everything was beginning to come together, but there was one more hurdle that 479 would need to cross. In October of 1989, the shipyard's debts had increased too much. Bankruptcy was declared. The head of the yard knew this was eventually going to happen, but he was powerless to stop it. Being one not to go down without a fight, he phoned Ericsson and they began to plan a strategy to both save the yard and Carnival's future ships. With only weeks away from the expected delivery of 479, a long series of meetings were held to find a way to save everything. The scheduled maiden voyage, unfortunately, was postponed by several months. Thankfully, in a very short amount of time, the yard was reorganized. A new company was formed, Caverna Massa Yards, and the final touches of 479 were finished without much of a delay. Carnival's newest ship, although slightly behind schedule, was now complete. The early issues of interior design, the bankruptcy of the shipyard, plus all the usual headaches of building a new, giant cruise ship had taken their toll, but now was the time to celebrate. In March, 479 was named Fantasy. She was now officially Carnival's ship. The newest member of the Carnival fleet came out at 855 feet long, 103 feet wide, and a displacement of 70,367 gross tons, making her one of the largest passenger ships ever built at that time, and certainly the largest for Carnival. Passenger capacity was 2,052 in double occupancy, and there were 920 crew members to take care of both them and the ship. On the lowest levels of the 10 passenger accessible decks, there were the majority of the cabins, which mainly consisted of interior and ocean view types. However, amidships on Deck 6, there were 28 inlaid balcony suites, the first ever seen on a Carnival ship. It was said that each of the cabins were some of the most generous in size, each being at least 186 square feet in floor space. For a mainstream cruise line, this was indeed very generous, especially when compared to Sovereign of the Seas cabins, some of which were only 119 square feet in size. Farkas designed her interiors to invoke a central idea, or theme, of changes through time. The lowest of the public venue decks was 8, which featured the Universe Lounge, which was a 2-story high theater with a 70-foot wide dance floor, a piano bar, and 2 restaurants. Deck 9 featured the asymmetric promenade that had been pioneered on the Holiday class. Located on the starboard side, Century Boulevard allowed for a seamless transition to many different areas, including the largest casino yet put to sea, with 212 slot machines, floor roulette, 4 craps, and 22 blackjack tables. Nearby, the ancient Egyptian-themed Cleopatra Bar could be found. For those not interested in that decor, there was also the Cat's Lounge, which evoked a alternate universe feel. On 10, there was a large pool, 2 whirlpools, and a buffet. A deck above that, there were more cabins, which featured balconies, which was a new and emerging room type in the industry at the time. At this level, one could also find 2 types of lifeboats, 20 in all. Fantasy was one of the last cruise ships ever created, with lifeboats located on the upper decks. At the aft, there was an additional pool and 2 whirlpools. There was also plenty of open deck space around the exposed upper decks. To give off the impression of a more nautical theme, the decks were finished off with teak wood, a traditional type of decking found on older ocean liners. At the heart of Fantasy, and the first space to be designed for the new ship, was the 6-deck-high Grand Spectrum. Inside were 2 glass elevators, a grand marble staircase, a 20-foot-high glass sculpture, and nearly 15 miles of neon tubing, which would change color throughout the day and night. To top it all was the largest skylight ever put to sea at that time, allowing every bit of natural light to brighten the space during the day. This space, along with other public venues, many of which we have not even covered, were designed to excite the mind and to make passengers forget anything about where they actually were. She was anything but traditional on the inside. Thanks to advancements in propulsion technology, she was a lot quieter than her predecessors. For power generation, there were 2 Sulzer Wärtsilä 8ZAV40S and 4 12ZAV40S diesels, with a total power output of 42,240 kilowatts. They helped drive 2 fixed-shaft, variable pitch propellers that would give her an average cruising speed of 21 knots. At the port of Miami, the newly named and completed Fantasy departed on her maiden voyage. Rather than doing 7-night or longer itineraries, as was essentially a requirement for a new ship at the time, Carnival decided that this ship would break away from that tradition. She would instead operate on 3- and 4-night cruises, something completely unheard of. Those types of cruises, though on the rise at the time, were relegated to older and smaller vessels. It certainly seemed out of place for the newest and largest member of the #1 cruise line to run this type of itinerary. By doing this, it allowed for so many more individuals to cruise due to its better affordability and the smaller sacrifice of vacation days. Combined with it being the best of the best in terms of the cruising experience, it would certainly lead to further bookings and better retention down the road. And it worked brilliantly, so much so that Fantasy would not be a one-off in this arena. Just 13 months after her debut, the next member of the class entered service, Ecstasy. Then in late 1993, a third sister ship, Sensation, entered service. But even this was not going to be enough. So high was the demand for these 3 vessels that more needed to be ordered. In 1994 came Fascination. A year later, Imagination started her career. Inspiration followed her, starting operations in 1996. But even 6 wasn't going to be enough, even during a time when Carnival was beginning to launch bigger and more modern ships. In 1998, 2 more entered service, Elation and Paradise. Never before in all of maritime history had a single company had the financial means and confidence to build 8 ships of similar design and in such a short amount of time. Even to this day, there has not been a class of cruise ships that have passed an 8-vessel count. Though virtually identical exteriorly, the interior design is what separated them apart, each having their own central idea or theme. There were also some more historical differences between them. Elation, for example, became the first ever cruise ship to feature rotating propellers, or azipods, which is now a virtual requirement for cruise ships today. Paradise became the first all non-smoking cruise ship when she was launched, although this ban is no longer in effect today. It is clear that Fantasy and her sisters accomplished what Carnival wanted to pursue from the beginning: create fun, affordable, and efficient ships. In 1993, after spending her first several years out of Miami, Fantasy relocated to Port Canaveral, but continued to run similar itineraries into the Bahamas. She remained there until 2006, when she became the first cruise ship to home port in New Orleans, following Hurricane Katrina, to run cruises to Mexico. While there in 2007, her name was updated to Carnival Fantasy in order to be more consistent with the names of her fleet mates. In the coming decade, she would see a few more homeport changes and extensive renovations that altered the interior design and added new venues. These refits were a part of Carnival's fleet-wide Funship 1.0 and 2.0 campaigns. Some of the more notable things added was a mini-golf course and the Carnival Waterworks, which featured 2 water slides onto the stern. In January 2019, she was put through another extensive refit, which added another new venue, revived the arcade, updated the majority of the carpeting and tiling, as well as general maintenance. Despite being nearly a 30-year-old vessel by this point, having extensive refits like this showed just how much she and her sisters were still in demand. Following the refit, she cruised out of the port of Mobile, Alabama, to sail Western Caribbean itineraries. In the beginnings of the worldwide coronavirus outbreak, cruise lines were forced to shut down all operations. Carnival Corporation, having the largest passenger ship fleet of any company, was hit hard. Keeping all of these ships, which numbered around 100, sitting either in port or out at sea, hemorrhaged money at a rapid rate. They can't just be shut down and abandoned. Their machinery needed to be kept running, and maintenance needed to be done regularly. Within months, Carnival was left with little to do. They had to start ditching some of their older ships and try and save what they could. By late May, Fantasy was tied up at Miami, awaiting whatever fate came her way. Carnival had hoped to bring her back into service in April, but the suspensions continued far longer than expected. With no clear route to take, and with no end seemingly in sight, luck finally ran out. Carnival regrettably made the announcement that both Carnival Fantasy and her sister, Carnival Inspiration, had been sold for scrap. For those who cruised on her before, hearing the news was devastating. For many, Fantasy and her sisters were probably the first cruise ship they ever went on, and is what brought them into this new type of vacation experience. For others, usually those who had not experienced them, they thought the news was long overdue, pointing to their age, sometimes over-the-top interior decor, and the lack of new and innovative features. It was a mixed bag of reactions overall, and it was really surprising to see just how many cruisers were sad that she would not be returning. Not long afterward, she left the same port she started her career from 30 years prior and made her way over to Turkey for scrapping. She was beached at full speed onto the scrapyard on the 29th of July. Next to her were two other ships recently sold, one of which was her old arch-rival, the former Sovereign of the Seas. Not long afterward, she was joined by her sisters Carnival Inspiration and Carnival Imagination. The dismantling process began a month later in late August. By September 21st, Carnival Fantasy was no more. Would she have continued had her life not been suddenly cut off? We'll never know. On the one hand, her owners were still sinking plenty of money into her through large refits, and she still had a sizable positive following from passengers. On the other hand, she was the product of an age and clientele that is largely gone. The cruise ships of today are made differently, feature so many new and impressive attractions, and simply have better, more efficient, and cleaner machinery. Fantasy, in one way or another, would have eventually been forced out. Unfortunately, no passenger ship, no matter how successful and sensational when they first debut, lasts forever. All eventually fall out of style or are not able to compete in one way or another. Fantasy was clearly reaching the end of her life anyway. It is just a shame that she left without a proper goodbye. It is no coincidence that her revolutionary but very evolutionary design and operation has left so many, to this day, look back at her with fond memories. From her over-the-top interior design, the breathtaking atrium space, the never-before-seen new ship 3- and 4-day cruise itinerary, and the affordability factor all contributed to her success. She and her sisters proved that any individual, no matter how they fell on the income spectrum or how distrusting of the sea they were, can enjoy a cruise experience, and they worked far better than anyone could have dreamed of. The simple fact that there were 8 of them, some of which were being made when the company was making bigger and better ships, shows that Carnival found their magic formula through them. Their legacy continued on and further evolved in classes and vessels long afterward, which included the first ever passenger ship to exceed 100,000 tons in displacement, Carnival Destiny. Unfortunately, what they were designed for and what they embodied is all now in the past. As of July 2024, only 2 of her sisters are left in service. She is a figure of a bygone era, but within that time she opened the door not only for more impressive cruise ships that would be built later on, but for the everyday individual who had no chance or desires to cruise beforehand. She was the first for so many hundreds of thousands of people, and for many of them, because of what she offered, it would not be the last. In those 30 years, she accomplished exactly what her owners intended for her from the very beginning. to introduce thousands to the cruising experience, and do so aboard an affordable but fun ship. And that is the legacy of Carnival Fantasy, Carnival's first beloved Colossus.
stuck on the ocean now, nothing but waves and they're spilling in. I wanna dry up but you just keep on going, don't you? I don't even know how we got here, all my reasoning have disappeared. I wanna bury the hatchet and find the way back to our home, our home, our home. We don't have to drift inside this dome. I will not let us fade away. It's not a price I wanna pay, and it's not too late. No, we lost our purpose, chasing all that surplus. You were all that I need. I feel that we can break free. We can still go back there to a place with no cares. We can turn this ship around. We can turn this ship around all the way back home. Chasing all that we do not have, chasing all that we don't have, chasing all that we do not have, we do not, all the way back home. Chasing all that we do not have, chasing all that we don't have, chasing all that we do not have, we do not. Yesterday we could be ourselves, didn't have much but nevertheless we were true to each other. But now we don't even bother. I remember you being hopeful, but the tall waves have worn us down, and slowly we are drowning. That's why you need to come with me, with me, with me. Turn around 180 degrees and cross the sea. I will not let us fade away. It's not a price I wanna pay, and it's not too late. No, we lost our purpose, chasing all that surplus. You were all that I need. I feel that we can break free. We can still go back there to a place with no cares. We can turn this ship around. We can turn this ship around all the way back home. Chasing all that we do not have, chasing all that we don't have, chasing all that we do not have, we do not, all the way back home. Chasing all that we do not have, chasing all that we don't have, chasing all that we do not have, we do not. I always knew we could do so many great things, so believe in me, I believe in you. And I just feel that this will be an upswing. So hear me out.